All right, Tom, walk me through how Sauce Gardner wound up a Colt, please.
This was fascinating, Rich, because there's not many out of nowhere blockbusters where there's not been whispers, there's not been reports, rumors, or anything. And it turns out, the more I dug into it, that this was something that had been in the works for a while. In the initial phone conversations, and this is like 3 weeks ago, they kind of agreed, hey, if this is going to actually happen, we got to keep all this really, really tight. The first call, I was told, was from the Colts assistant general manager, Ed Dodds, to Darren Muji. And it was the usual kind of feel-out calls of, hey, like, who's available? Who would you move? And Muji's answer, more or less, was anybody on the team's available for a price. At that time, Muji was focused on moving Michael Carter, who was a slot, who was making a lot of money, eventually traded him to the Eagles. The Colts didn't need a slot. They got Kenny Moore. They needed an outside corner. And so that night, Chris Ballard, the Colts GM, called Muji back and was like, hey, what would you think about moving Sauce? And so there was a little back and forth. Then last week, they kind of reconnected. And at that point, Chris Ballard knew that the price was going to be really high to get Sauce Gardner. And he was still, kind of on the fence about whether or not he was willing to go there. And then from what I was told, the Colts and Ballard kind of did some research on the history of these in-season trades. And there's like no precedent for a 24-year-old all-pro corner who is cost-controlled on a fresh extension that was signed like 3 or 4 months ago to move teams. It just never happens. In other words, this was not just like a lot of these trade deadline deals, a guy in a contract year, Jalen Phillips, Jacoby Myers at the end of his deal, where it's kind of like, hey, we're going for it right now. They viewed this as both the short and long-term type of a fix. And so by the time we got to this past Sunday, just a few days ago, they kind of concluded, like, we might have an opportunity to do something really interesting here. So Monday morning, they talked again. Then Chris Ballard basically said, hey, I got to go to my owner. That's Carlie-Irsay Gordon, who everyone knows has been really involved, taking notes on the sideline. She's been training for this for years, understanding every different aspect of roster building and of the organization, including how the scouting process works. And so they had conversations with Chris Ballard, Shane Steichen, Carlie-Irsay Gordon on Monday, and essentially it got to a point where I was told Carlie said something to the effect of like, all right, why don't we just go get the best guy? And so by Monday night,
love it.
Chris Ballard was coming back and saying, all right, we will do the 2-1s. Darren Muji said, hey, I got to talk to Woody Johnson. He's over in London. Tuesday morning, Muji calls back for, as a lot of these big trades go, one more ask. And it was, hey, how about you throw in A.D. Mitchell, a talented young wide receiver who the Colts have been shopping him. They had some different offers, for kind of low-level compensation. Would you throw him into the deal? So Ballard went back. He talked again with Carlie and with Shane, and they decided, okay, let's do this thing. One of the timing complication was most of the Jets organization was at Nick Mangold's funeral at that time, so they had to keep it quiet for a few more hours. Then once the Jets brass was able to leave and not have their phones lighting up during the funeral, that's when Sauce was called in and told he was being traded to the Colts, which then led to, again, something that is very, very rare in this day and age, which is Sauce Gardner breaking the trade of sorts by putting it on social media like, basically, thanks for everything, New York, I'm out, which then set off the frenzy of phone calls. Ian Rappaport a couple minutes later puts out Sauce has been traded to the Colts. It was, as much as we kind of had anticipated and knew that there was a lot going on surrounding Quinnen Williams, there was not really a whiff of this with Sauce Gardner. It's doable because rather than doing a lump sum signing bonus when they extended him back in July, they put a lot of the money into a $20 million option bonus in 2026. The Colts now are responsible for that. The Jets get the opportunity to really remake some things and have a ton of draft capital, plus a flyer on a young player that they like. And the Colts get a guy who's already locked in on a pre-negotiated contract that brought instant energy, I was told, to the building after the trade. And we'll get our first look at him Sunday morning in Brazil against the Falcons.
All right. So 3 things to follow up on. First one, real quick. Boy, you really had the opportunity there. And feel free to use this moving forward when you have these conversations. You had the opportunity to say that the Colts flipped A.D. Mitchell to the Jets, but you didn't do that. Number 2,
If they did, they would do it at the appropriate time after crossing the goal line of the trade. But it turns out that was the last move to get them across.
Tom, I was trying to be subtle, and then you came in. You didn't have to hit the nail on the head, man. I just leave the subtlety to me. Listen, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Totally get it. But was there anything going on rumor-wise that Sauce could be had to lead the Colts to say, what about Sauce? I mean, he said he didn't ask for a trade, but as you point out, I mean, 24-year-olds under contract, control, freshly under contract control, who are as good as this kid, they're not available for any price. Why did Ballard ask other than just, was there something there? Is there something there, Tom?
This is why, Rich. It's the Colts were calling everybody in the NFL and trying to find a corner. There was just not a lot out there. They had another trade that if this had fallen through, maybe they would have gone through with it. But my understanding was their thinking is even if they made a trade for one of these other guys you could get for, let's say, a mid-round draft pick, it wasn't going to be that much different than what they had already. In order to get a true upgrade, not just for the rest of this year, but for the long haul, you needed to do something really big and bold. I mean, they still were asking those questions into last week. I got certain calls from people there as well, just saying, are there any corners? And there really wasn't anything in the marketplace. So no, this was the classic, anytime you've got a team that, like the Jets, I mean, a few weeks ago they were winless. They finally got their first win before the bye, where you call and you're just like, all right, what will you listen on? It was the same thing with the Dolphins last week where, in essence, they told everybody, we're willing to listen to anybody on the roster. Ultimately, the one move they made was trading Jalen Phillips to the Eagles, but there was a price point at which Jalen Waddle would have been moved. There were price points at which their other pass rushers, like Bradley Chubb, would have been moved. Brandon Beane, the Bills GM, said it well in his press conference a couple days ago, which is 99% of the players in the league are available at a price. There's all kinds of things that go into it in terms of how would you use those draft picks, the cash and cap that goes into it. There were really not, other than Jalen Phillips, there were none of these trades that were predicated on being paid down. Kyle Duggar was, but that was the previous week. There was no buying of draft picks outside of a little bit of Miami, but even that was like $5 million. With Sauce, he was not somebody that they were actively pushing. He was not unhappy there. If you look at all the advanced metrics, Sauce has been one of the best corners in the NFL this season. But for the Jets, I think it's always important to look at it this way. They were, as these clocks were going 0-6, 0-7. They were not a Sauce Gardner away from winning it all. The combination of things that they got out of these trades, they now have 2 first-round picks in 2026. They have 3 first-round picks in 2027, plus extra second-round picks. Maybe the most fascinating thing, Rich, that came out of all these trades was that initially Dallas had a 2026 first-rounder as part of the deal, along with a lower pick, I was told a 4th-rounder in 2027. It ends up with a second-round pick in 2026 and a first-round pick in 2027. A lot of people would look at that and say, well, you're downgrading that first-round pick. Well, A, they get the additional pick ends up being a higher pick, the second-rounder. But B, the Jets actively wanted the extra pick in 2027. Why would that be? 2027, based upon all the scouts and GMs I've talked to, is generally regarded as a better draft as a whole. Mm-hmm. And quite possibly with all the questions about the quarterbacks in this year's class, 2027 might end up being the stronger class for QBs at a time that the Jets are a little further in their program. Their 2027 first-round pick, their own, might not be as high as their 2026 pick is. Now all of a sudden you've got an extra 2026 pick to move up if you find that QB, but you've also got 3 picks in 2027 where if your own pick is in the middle of the first round, bundling all those together gives you a lot of leverage to try to go up and get the quarterback if you're still needing one in 2027.
Hey, you made it all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Check us out every single day streaming live on Disney Plus and the ESPN app 12 to 3 Eastern.